In a New York Times article titled "Denmark's Cruelty Toward Refugees," the author says this: several Republican candidates have preposterously promised to ban all Muslims from traveling to the United States. Is it preposterous? Perhaps in practice. Would it really be possible to fulfill such an endeavor? Barriers include the preliminary passage of government approval and the subsequent journey of enforcing such a policy which is so dependent on human honesty and limited government investigative resources. While this promise by Republican candidates may be practically improbable to enforce, it is short-sighted to claim that there is no viable reasoning behind the desire to deter Muslim immigrants. The article makes no mention of the threats that coincide with Muslim immigration, only the cruel treatment that they are receiving in the countries that they are seeking asylum. This can mean that either the New York Times does not recognize the threat or that they intentionally withheld the information so as not to weaken their argument. In either case, this is a point of contention of three parts. The first being, immigration is different today because not everyone coming to the United States is coming for the American dream, especially those in favor of Sharia law. Mark Nuckolls writes in a Town Hall article that it is a ridiculous and dangerous myth that possession of American citizenship automatically means loyalty to America. Much of this disloyalty arises from anti-American ways of thought that we see in Muslim-dominated countries. The most daunting of these ideologies is Sharia law. An article in the National Review has this to say about Sharia law: it denies freedom of conscience, free expression, property rights, economic liberty, and due process of law. It licenses wars of aggression against infidels for the purpose of establishing Sharia as the law of the land. Sharia is also heavily favored by Muslims in majority Muslim countries. Polling consistently tells us that upwards of 2/3 of Muslims in the countries from which we are accepting refugees believe Sharia should be the governing system. Another source from the Pew Research Center writes that nearly all Muslims in Afghanistan, 99%, and most in Iraq, 91%, and Pakistan, 84%, support Sharia law as official law. There is a dangerous amount of anti-American sentiment coming into our country through immigration. The second point of contention is that ISIS attacks from within its enemy's borders. They don't send missiles from afar. They come to us and they sacrifice their own lives in order to kill innocent people. We can't use traditional methods to fight these people. ISIS has said that they will use immigration movements to infiltrate our countries. Harold Balder writes in Immigration Dialectic, international mobility has been a major concern in the context of these events. Taliban leaders were able to escape U.S. forces by moving across the Afghan-Pakistani border. Al-Qaeda was so evasive because it is a transnationally, highly mobile network, and the fundraisers of terrorism transgressed national borders. ISIS does not play by the rules, which makes immigration far more daunting. And finally, ISIS terrorists use the legal immigration process. Mark Nuckolls writes, senior al-Qaeda recruiter Anwar al-Awlaki was an American citizen of Yemeni descent. Nidal Hassan, who killed 13 people at Fort Hood, is an American of Palestinian descent. Muhammad Yusuf Abdulaziz, who murdered 5 people in Chattanooga, was a naturalized American citizen of Jordanian descent. The Federation for Immigration Reform writes of the 9/11 terrorists, all of them entered the country legally on a temporary visa, mostly tourist visas with entry permits for 6 months. 4 of them attended flight school in the United States. The National Review writer says it best when he wrote, "Right now, American immigration policy is serving the interests of immigrants at the expense of American national security. This evidence is not intended to stereotype all Muslims as being dangerous enemies, nor is it intended to purport that the only protection against these dangers is to ban all Muslim immigrants from entering the United States. Rather, this evidence serves to call into question the flippant manner with which the New York Times treats the Republicans' proposition that we might do something to protect ourselves from this real and imminent danger. Perhaps securing our border from radical Islamic terrorists is not quite so preposterous after all.